Hello, everybody on YouTube, NFL YouTube prognosticators, and NFL fans everywhere. This is Andrew Warren. Back once again. I'm going to give you the rest of my top 10 for the top 10 wildcard games. But I'll pick up where I left off. Number 10, Browns and Steelers in the 2002 wildcard game, the Browns' final meltdown, I believe I should call it. Number 9, Tony Romo's boot snap for against the Seattle Seahawks in 2006. Number 8, Matt Hasselbeck's overconfidence. We want the ball, we're going to score. Number 7, Brett Favre's first playoff victory. Lions and Packers in 1993. Number 6, the Chargers upset the Indianapolis Colts in the 2008 wildcard game. Peyton Manning's meltdown in San Diego, I call it. Now for the number 5, the 49ers and the Giants. I call it the one. Some people call it the one wild game. I call it the referee's mistake. At this point, this game is mostly remembered when the Giants opened up an instrumental lead, making it 38-5-14. Then 49ers went back with Jeff Garcia on the sideline, and they ended up storming back. They needed everything to go right at that point. Then all of a sudden, it was the Giants were ahead by 39-38. Then the Giants were trying to get a comeback of their own. All of a sudden, they were in position to win the game with 6 seconds left to go. All of a sudden, Drake Junkin made a bad snap. Then the Giants at that point were trying to want to win the ball game, but I forget who was there was an offensive lineman who was throwing at the. They were trying to throw it at the defensive lineman, but the 49ers was interfered at that. He was holding him like this. He would tackle them. I forget. I think it was the 49er player who tackled the Giants player. I can't think of his name at that point, so I don't remember the names in my head. But all it is remembered that they missed the call. They called an illegal man downfield instead it was a pass interference call. But this game was criticized for that. The Giants were screaming that was interference, which it was at that point. But it's boldly remembered that the referees made the mistake on that. Instead, the offensive lineman was an eligible receiver instead of offensive lineman in the play, though. But as soon as the referee saw that, they knew they were probably dead, or like, oh my God, we made a mistake. They were, what do we do? What do we do? They were probably panicking. But then the next day, though, the referees, the NFL said they they blew the call. And Steve Mariucci said, bummer. Bummer. But at that point, they gave the league some credibility at that. They said if the NFL screws it up, they would admit it. But if they said it was right, they had no credibility for defending a controversial call, though. But that was a standpoint to say, look, the NFL makes mistakes at that point. So let's put it at that, though. So, all right, number 4. The Music City Miracle game, the Bills and the Titans in 1999. Well, this was a game probably remembered for that wild finish in the kickoff return, but this is one where Wade Phillips at the time said he was going to start Rob Johnson over Doug Flutie, which at that point I think Doug Flutie should start over Rob Johnson. I think Doug Flutie was up for comeback player of the year that year after being out of the CFL for a little while, so. But this is boldly remembered for not starting Doug Flutie over Rob Johnson. Though Rob Johnson had a decent game, though, but he was remembered as being a sack machine more than being an NFL starter. He had one good game for replacing Mark Brunell in Jacksonville, and he had one good game. He had a good contract out of it, and they all thought he could play. That didn't turn out in Buffalo, but at that point, I think Rob Johnson was uncomfortable with the position, though, but once he was starting, though, in the playoff game, it became an unpopular decision. But at that point, though, Buffalo was going to win the game, going for the game-winning field goal as they were kicking it off. But the tables turned. Tennessee set up a kickoff play. They put up a lateral, which Buffalo fans still to this day said it was a lateral. It was not a lateral, but it kind of was. It was not going backwards, but not a lot, but going backwards at that point. I keep watching that play over and over and over and over again. I keep saying, that was very close. It was a lateral, but not that much. But at that point, that was the beginning of the end for Buffalo. They haven't made the playoffs since then. As of right now, they haven't made. I think they have the longest drought for not making the playoffs. I think they have the longest drought in not making the playoffs currently. So at that point, Tennessee went on to win the game. They ended up going to Super Bowl 34, and that became the game 1 yard short, or the tackle at that point for Tennessee. And Tennessee, they had a little bit of success, but they slimmed down a little bit in the early 2000s. They go up in mid-2000s again at that point. So, and look at Tennessee right now. But that game is basically remembered for a couple of reasons. One, when Wade Phillips benching Rob Johnson over Doug Flutie, and for that controversial call in the end of the game for the Music City Miracle game. So, there you go. Number 3, the catch-2, the Packers and the 49ers. Well, I think we all know what this one is. Steve Young is probably going to the end of his career. You want to go on a high note at that point, and how can it be a high note than that for trailing by 4 points and then going to going for the game-winning drive for Terrell Owens. Terrell Owens had a rotten day, though. People often forget about that, though. Terrell Owens was dropping balls and everything, and the one play he needed, he got it at that point. I think that was the start of the career of Terrell Owens at that point. Well, probably not. I think I take that back. Probably the start of his career when he was in that Dallas game when he had to start. I think that was first before the catch game, though. But it was around that time frame, though. But that game was locally remembered for being one of the toughest on wildcard games we ever seen. And at that point, I think that was the one game that Steve Young wanted to have one final drive. Needed one last miracle game, and they got it in that point. So me personally, I like to call it the catch, dude, but sometimes I prefer it as Steve Young's last miracle. So that's what I would call that on that one. No, but this became known as the catch-2, though. And Steve Young, I think he would go on to retire, I think a year later. And then the 49ers would be back a little bit since then until Jim Harbaugh kicked in the picture. So as for the Packers, they had a little bit of success with Brett Favre, but they still have more success now when Aaron Rodgers came in the picture too. So at that point, that was a good standoff at that point, though. But the game is mostly remembered for that one big play that Steve Young needed, and that he got it at that point. So, but I think that was Steve Young's last game too. I don't know if that was his last game or he went the year before. So, but that's mostly known as being Steve Young's last miracle. So. All right, number 2, the Packers and the Cardinals, I'd call that one Aaron Rodgers versus Kurt Warner in the one wild game in 2009. That game is mostly remembered. That game as being a young gun versus an old gun on that one. But the only difference is that Aaron Rodgers had the legs. He could run. He was a big speed demon too. But that game right there, that sealed it as a Hall of Fame quarterback for Kurt Warner. Kurt Warner at the time, though, the Cardinals are the defending NFC champions. They lost to the Super Bowl against Pittsburgh. They were trying to go back to the Super Bowl at that point, and they were playing against the Green Bay Packers, and that was a high-scoring game. I think there were 6 lead changes at that point, though. But anyway, the game was tied at 45, and the Green Bay won the toss. They were trying to go for the game-winning drive, but instead, that game is basically remembered when Aaron Rodgers, when the Cardinals were trying to sack Aaron Rodgers, when he boots the fumble, when the linebacker guy caught it, ran for the touchdown, and the game was over. All you can remember is seeing Mike McCarthy going on his knees like, "Are you kidding me? No!" But that game was one of the best wild card games I ever seen. So, that's why it's number 2 in my book, so I'll give you that. But hey, before I get to my some people would say that game, how it ended, it was like, that's all? They say it was a good performance, but they don't really sure that should be really a best game they ever seen. Which, I kind of understand that point, though, but that's one heck of a game, though. But for wild card games, that's got to be in the top 3, though. So that's why I put it up there. So, but before I get to my number 1 pitch, which I think you all know about that one, you guys know about that, what's number 1 going to be, but I got a few audible mentions. the Saints' first road playoff victory in Philadelphia. I believe it was 2014 or 15. No, I think it was 2013 when they beat the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Eagles, at that point, Chip Kelly's first coaching career, his first playoff victory, and Chip Kelly never got to the playoffs since that point. But you know what happened with that. So Nick Foles, everyone's starting to get his attention, and yeah, but that didn't all work out for that. But the Saints, at that point, they were looking for their first wild card, their first playoff road game, and they ended up getting it against Philadelphia at that point. So, and one more. This happened this year. Blair Walsh missed field goal. Yeah, that happened this year. But this game is going to probably be remembered that Blair Walsh was kicking 3 field goals. Maybe, and they tried to go for the 4th one. It was a chip shot, and that missed the game with that. That's going to be remembered on that one. So he's probably joined with Gary Anderson and Billy Cundiff in that picture, and maybe Steve. I can't think of his name. The kicker for the Buffalo Bills who missed right. So I can't think of his name at that point. But anyways, they're joining them they're all joining each other for all the missed field goals in the playoffs. I know the Buffalo and Giants game was right. So I can't think of his name at that point. So it's gonna come to me later. I know that. So it always does. So, but anyways, that's what Blair Walsh is. He joined on that group on that one. And number 1 right now. Speaking of the Bills, it's the Bills and the Oilers, the comeback game. That's number 1, in my opinion. That game is boldly remembered when the Oilers blew a 32-point comeback game. I think it was 28-3 at halftime. I think it was 28-3 at halftime. And then all of a sudden, the Houston opened up a 35-3, and that's when the comeback started in the second half. But at that point, Jim Kelly wasn't playing at that game though. It was Frank. Can't think of his backup quarterback. I can't think of it right now. Frank Wright, I think his name is. I know it was Frank something, so I think it was Frank Wright. But he was the one starting the game, not Chip Kelly though. And it started for him in college football though when he was in the University of Maryland, having a 31-point comeback against Miami. I think it was for the ACC championship game, but he had a backup quarterback with Jim Kelly most of his career. And at that point though, he ended up starting the wild card game against the Bills, with the Bills against the Oilers, and he came up a 32-point comeback, and the rest was history. And at that point, I think they were going for their, I think it was the third Super Bowl appearance, and they ended up blowing against Dallas, and they ended up a year later against Dallas again. But at that point, Buffalo, you know what happened with Buffalo, and they at that point, Buffalo went, whoo, down the hill at that point. So there you go. There's my wild card picks on that one. I'll be back with you at the division round maybe at some point. Until then, I'll see you all soon.